Be'ez Hashem Yisboch, we begin the Perek Asiri, the 10th chapter in the Rambam's Hilchos Shechitah in the Sefer Kedusha, which we continue with the 8 treifas, specifically that of Shvura, of if it's broken, and then the Rambam goes and summarizes all the treifas that we had mentioned. So halacha after Rambam opens up regarding Shvura, the 8th, that of the halacha Mishneh Sinai, that's considered as a treif. It's a broken. Ketzad, what qualifies for this tarfus? So the Rambam Hushin Nishtaber Roiv Tzalasel. This is if the majority of its ribs broke, that qualifies as a tarfus. Now the Rambam explains. It says B'tzalas haBeheimahen, the ribs of an animal are achas esrim mikan, v'achas esrim mikan. 11 ribs on one side, 11 ribs on the other side. Nishtaber sheish mikan v'sheish mikan. So let's say if 6 broke on one side, 6 broke on another side. Or achas esrim mikan v'achas mikan, or even 11 on one side and 1 on the other side. So treifa, because that's the majority of the ribs that broke. The who, and that is shenishbru michetzrin shel mul hashedra, as long as it's the half that's opposite the area of the backbone. If that's where it broke, because that's where its primary vitality is, not the half that's facing the part of the breast. If the part that's facing the backbone, if that's the ones that broke, that's going to make it into a treifa. Now, says Halacha Beis, nishbru sheish mikan v'sheish mikan. Let's say, however, he further qualifies. It says, let's say, okay, you have 6 from this one that broke and 6 from that one, which that is only 11 on each side, 6 is the majority. So you have the majority of the sum total that broke. So if they're the large ribs that have marrow inside of it, then treifa is going to be treifa. But if not, even though it's the majority of the ribs, and even if it's the parts that's towards the backbone, it's those ribs that broke, mutaras, the animal is going to be permitted. So too if, meaning this so too is going on the primary halacha, so too if the majority of the ribs didn't break, but they got uprooted, treifa, that's also going to make the animal into a treifa. Now, the nekra filat tzela achas. Now, if even one rib got uprooted, v'chatzi chulyasa ima, and the half of the vertebrae is with it, because of the vertebrae connecting from the spine, the ribs on either side, so the half of that vertebrae got removed with that rib, shatzela tzkuba, that rib gets stuck into. That's where it's attached to the backbone. How is it a treifa? That would also make the animal to a treifa. And the chinim nekrim and ashedra chulyachas. So too, if let's say it was removed from the spine, from the backbone, just one vertebrae, even if it's from the vertebrae that's beneath the area of the flanks, lower down, shemim tzlois, where there's not even any ribs coming out from that part of the backbone, still, if a vertebrae would come out, how is it a treifa? That would make the animal into a treifa. Halacha gimel. So regarding behema and the animal, sheyishmat hayarech shalom me'ikarei, if the thigh got dislodged from its primary connection, where it's v'yatzim that kafshlei came out from its socket, so in this achlu nivav, if the sinews got degenerated, vehein and they are what are these? How you say this? They're like a peg-like protrusion shebe'etzem hakaf that's in the bone of the socket. Sheyotzis ala etzem hazacha that goes out toward the, so to speak, the male bone, which is that which comes into that socket, and it grabs a hold of it. If those sinews got degenerated that hold onto that zachar bone, here's a treifa, then animal is going to be treifa. But if it didn't degenerate, then mutaras and animal is going to be permitted. Regarding fowl, if nishmat yireicha, if the hip got dislodged, treifa, it's going to be a treifa. Nishmat kanafay miikar, let's say the wing got dislodged from its socket, so we're concerned that maybe the lung got punctured. Therefore you have to check the lungs, then you can eat it. And let's say an animal that its foreleg was dislodged from its socket, which has been admitted, they were not concerned. The reason for that is, although the wing of a bird is the equivalent by the foreleg of an animal, the reason for that is because not concerned for the puncturing of the lungs, because the thickness of the shoulder bone protects and the lungs, and therefore we know that even though the foreleg was detached, that got dislodged, that it didn't puncture the lungs. The skull of an animal or a wild animal, that the size of a coin of a cellar was removed from that skull. Even if the membrane was not punctured, treifa, the animal is going to be treifa. And if, let's say, there's these small little holes that are missing from the skull, so kulam and starvim like a cellar, they're all going to join together. If it's the size of a cellar, that would make the animal into a treifa if it's missing that amount from the skull. So too regarding a skull that was crushed. Reiv gava, the majority of its height, meaning from the eyes and above, the Reva Kefa in the majority of its circumference, the skull was crushed that amount, so treifa is going to be considered as a treifa. And Av Bishakum Shalom, even though the membrane that's right beneath the skull is intact, and nothing from that is missing, it's still going to be as a treifa. Now let's say Nechbes Reiv Gobel, let's say the majority of the height of the skull was crushed, but Reiv HaKefa, the majority of the circumference is intact. Or the other way around. Nechbes Reiv HaKefa, the majority of its circumference was crushed, but the majority of the height is still intact. It's a fake treifa, so that's already a doubt if it's a treifa. It appears to me that we would make it forbidden in that situation too. Halacha Zayin. Oiv Shalmayim, waterfowl, like geese, which those are the types of birds that they are primarily in the water. So if there was a hole in the bone of the skull, although there wasn't punctured the membrane of the brain, treifa, that was going to be a treifa. The reason is because the waterfowl, the membrane is very soft, and when the bone breaks, the membrane's not going to last. Now, Oifi Abash regarding a land fowl, Shehikatu Chudal Reisha, if a weasel knocked the bird on its head, or let's say it banged itself on a stone or a piece of wood, so what you do is like this. If you put your hand on the side of the hole, and you press. What you do is you stick your hand into its mouth, but you push upwards. If the brain comes out of the hole, so then you know that obviously the membrane was punctured, and it's a treifa. But if not, then it's going to be permitted because the membrane was not punctured. And that's by landfowl, in contrast by waterfowl, which there we're concerned that it's very soft. Not so by the landfowl, but you would have to go ahead and do this test that we just said. Regarding an animal, there's two primary interpretations of what the Rambam is saying here. Either it's like the little translation where the blood was congested, or the Rambam means to say that the pressure of the blood was so strong that the animal was choking, or if it was smoked, meaning the smoke came into the body of the animal, or it means that actually that there was from the black gallbladder, it had a secretion, or if it was cold, it became sick because of the cold, or it actually means that it was the white gallbladder had a secretion. Or let's say the animal ate poison that would kill an animal. Or it drank bad waters. The animal is permitted because all these are not illnesses that would make it into a treifa, and it's just in danger of its own life, which you're allowed to shech and eat. But let's say let's say it ate poison that would kill a person, or a snake went and bit and injected its venom into the animal, which creates anything like that, which would be harmful for a person. So so that's not a problem because the laws of treifa, but it would be a problem because it's simply dangerous for a person to eat that animal because of the venom or because of the poison that's in the animal. So not because of halacha, but it's because of the halacha of sakanta, of danger to a person's life. Now look at this, the Rambam summarizes all the treifas that we spoke about. It says Nimtzu comes out that kol treifas amnuis kishi part to all the treifas that when you count the specifics, the efsh that's possible to have by domestic and wild animals are shivim, are 70s. The elihina ala seidishin is boru b'chibazen. Says Rambam, these are them on the order that you explained here in this compilation of the Rambam Ziyarah Chazaka, which the Kesef Mishneh actually organizes. He shows how the 70 treifas the Rambam is counting over here go and fit into the 8 categories of treifas that we said are halacha meish Sinai. So Rambam says, Aleph, number 1 is drusa, which the primary terminology, as we explained, of treifa, which means like it was attacked, that was pounced on. That's one type of a treifa. Beis, number 2 is nikav tarbet saveshet, if the opening of the gullet of the food pipe, if there's a hole in that tarbitz of the veshet. Gimel is nikav krim shel moyach, if there's a puncture in the membrane of the brain. Daled, number 4 is nismasmes hamoychatzmoy, if the brain itself gets liquefied, gets degenerates. Hey, number 5, nikav alev atzma lebeis chaloli, if the heart gets punctured going into the cavity of the heart. Vav, number 6 is nikav knei halev, if the arteries of the heart get punctured. Zayin, number 7, is nikva hamara, if the gallbladder is perforated. Ches, number 8, is nikva knei hakavod, if the arteries of the liver are perforated. Tes, number 9, is nikva hakeva, if the maw has a hole. Yud, number 10, is nikav hakaris, if the stomach has a hole. Nikav hamesis is Yud Aleph. Number 11 is if the abdomen has a hole. Yud Beis, 12 is nikav beis hakaisis, if the gut has a hole. Yud Gimel, number 13 is nikva me'eha, if the digestive organs are perforated. Yud number 14 is yotze ma'ayim l'chutz v'nefchu, if the intestines, they come out of the body and they get inverted. Tezvav, number 15 is nikav hatchil ba'avyai, if the spleen gets a hole in the thick part of the spleen. Tezayin, number 16 is chasra hamara. Here we're going by chasera now. If the mara, if the gallbladder is missing, Yudzayin, meaning it wasn't born with it. Yudzayin, number 17, nimtzu shtemirators, or like we said yesterday, is kachaser. If you find 2 gallbladders. Yudches, number 18, is chasra akeva, if it's missing the maw. Yutes, 19, is nimtu shtei kevus, or if you find 2 maws. Chav, number 20, is chasa akaris, if it's missing the stomach. Chav aleph, nimtu shnei kreis, if you find 2 stomachs. Chav beis, number 22, is chasa meses, if it's missing the abdomen. Chav gimel, nimtu shnei mesasim, if you find 2 abdomens. Chav dal, is chasa beis hakaisis, missing the gut. Chav hey, is nimtu shnei vatei kaisis, if you find 2 of these guts. Chavav, 26, chasa echem ma'ayim, if it's missing one of the digestive organs. Chav zayin, nimtu shnei ma'ayim, you find 27, if you find 2 digestive organs. Chav ches, 28, is nikva hareya, if it's perforated by the lung. Chav tes, nikav hakana, the windpipe is perforated. Lamata, lower down, b'makom she'ein ro'eh l'shchita, in the place which is not fit for the slaughtering to be. Lamed, number 30, is nikav simfain, misimfain hareya, if one of the bronchioles of the lungs is perforated, afil chaveroi, even if it's covered with the other bronchiole, that would still make it into a treifa. Lamed Aleph 31 is neta mokam minarei, if part of the lung got clogged up. Lamed Beis 32 is nimak simfain misimfain hareya, if one of the bronchioles from the lungs got degenerated. Lamed Gimel 33 is nimtza leichas strucha berei, if you find this putrid mucus that is in the lungs. Lamed Dal 34, a similar one, nimtzu b'mayim siruch, we find a putrid liquid, which liquid is different than the lecha. Lamed 35 is nimtzu b'mayim akurim, if you find inside of it these murky waters, af pishlei siruch, even if it didn't become putrid. Lamed 36 is mas masarei, if the lung became degenerated. Lamed Zayin 37 is neshana mareho, if it's changed its colors. Lamed Ches 30 is nepech haveshe b'marav, if the food pipe changed its appearance, its color. Lamates 39 is chasa harei min ha'unais, if the lung is missing any one of its numbers of lobes. Mem 40 is neschalfa ha'unais, if the order of the lobes are inverted, it is switched. Mem al 41 the hisir ha'unis megabah, if let's say there was added lobes from the back of the lungs. Mem base 42 is nisra ha'una la'unish, like a certain, if let's say the lobes attached to the other ones out of order. And Gimel 43 is nimtzis arei b'lechiduch aznaim. Let's say you find the lungs without separation of lobes. And Dalet 44 of chasa mixis arei, if you're missing some of the lung itself. Memhei 45 yavish mixis gufa, if some of the body of the lung dried up. Memvav 46 is nimtzis arei nefucha be'medz, if you find the lungs inflated and like that. Memzayin 47 is some karei mipachat adam, if let's say the lung shriveled up because of fright, specifically from a human. Memches 48 is chasa haregel, if it's missing the hind leg, whether it was born like that, or whether it was cut off. Memtes 49, seir regel, or if it had an extra hind leg. Nun 50 is nitlit semesagidim, if the joint of the tendons, that juncture, if that was removed. Nun Aleph 51 is nitla covered, if the liver was removed. Nun Beis 52 is nitl l'chiyah elyon, if the upper jaw was removed. Nun Gimel 53 is kul yishaktin b'yestiv, if you have the kidneys that were very small. Nun Dal 54 is kul yishalaksa, if you have the kidneys that were diseased. Nun Hey 55 is kul yishanimtzis ba'leich, if you find a kidney that you find this inside of it, this mucus. Nun Vav 56 is kul yishanimtzis ba'mayim akum, if you find inside the kidney this murky waters. Af b'she'in if it's not putrid. Nun Zayin 57 kul yishanimtzis ba'mayim struchim, if you find inside of it this putrid liquid. Nunches 58 is nifsek chut hashedra, if the spinal cord was severed. Nunches 59 is nimrach moich chut hashedra, if the marrow of the spinal cord was softened, v'nismasmis, and it degenerated. Samach 60 is nikurev habasa chivas akaris, if the majority of the flesh that covers the stomach was torn. Samach alf 61 is niglad ha'or shalef, the skin of the animal was removed. Samach Bey 62 is nisraskei v'reb and the fila, if let's say the limbs got dislodged from a fall. Samach Gimel 63 is nidaldul asamon, if the pipes of the windpipe and the food pipe got dislodged, was shaken from where it's attached to the body. Samach Dal 64 is nishtab rib talaseha, the majority of its ribs were broken. Samach 65 nekarib talaseha, the majority of the ribs were uprooted. Samach Vav 66 nekarib tela'achas b'chol yasef, even just one rib was uprooted with its vertebrae. Samach Zayin 67 is nekar chula'achas, if just one vertebrae was uprooted. Samach Ches 68 is nishmat hayoch meikarai, if the hip was dislodged from its socket. Samach Tes 69 is chas ha'gugelis kesel, if the skull was missing part of the skull, like the size of a sella, which size of a coin. And ayin, number 70, was nechbas reva hagugelis from this rate, if the majority of the skull was crushed and smashed. Those are the 70 specific treifas, which again fit into the generic 8 types of treifas, which are all halacha meshmesina. Now, halacha Yud Ram continues regarding the comparison of these treifas as it applies to oifis, to fowl. Says Ram, Elo Shivim Chaloyim, these 70 illnesses, which makes the wild animal forbidden because it's a treifa. So we already explained every one of them and their laws. Now, any one of them that are possible to be by fowl, by the limbs which are both by birds and by animals. So the law by behemoths and oifes are going to be the same. Except for the treifas that apply shabakulya to the kidneys, shabakulya to the spleen, and to the lobes by the lungs, as the Ram explains. Because fowl doesn't have separation of lobes on its lungs like that of a behemoth. And if you do find it like that, it does not have a set amount. And regarding the spleen of a bird, is round like a grape. Behemoth does not have the same anatomy like the spleen of an animal. Now, regarding the treifas in the kidneys and the spleen, we actually did not count them in the list of the Mishnah of the 70 by an animal, and they were only counted by the Meraim regarding being as a treifa. And the reason for that is Kadeshi connect them by, so that they should be a correlation regarding that as applies to birds, which, as we said, that birds don't have those treifas that behemoths have. Well, that's why they didn't give a measurement regarding the kidney being too small as it applies by oif, because like we said, it doesn't have these halachas as it has by behemoth. And anything else that's similar regarding other treifas, like for example if the kidneys are diseased or you find murky waters, again that doesn't apply by the birds. Now there are certain treifas actually that fowl has over that of behemoth, and there's specifically 2. Now, even though that they have those same organs, because actually there are certain organs that only birds have that animals don't have. No, we're talking about even though animals have the same organs, but it's specifically treifas that apply by birds and not by animals. And they are regarding if the intestines by the bird changed colors because it was in the fire. And also regarding the waterfowl, which, if, as we mentioned, if the bone of the head had a hole, even though the membrane was intact, that's going to be a treifa by oif. These 2 by oif is in contrast to that of behemoth. Now, halachah Beis Ram continues regarding how do we relate to these halachas of treifas as it applies to that of medicine being able to heal these wounds. As Ram says, one should not add on to these treifas at all, the 7 that we mentioned. And the reason is because anything that happens to an animal, wild animal, or bird, besides for these that were counted by the earlier sages, and then were agreed upon in the courts of the judge of the Jewish people, anything else, it's possible for a creature to survive. And even though we know from medicine that's not possible for it to live, we don't add that on. It's not considered as a treifa. And Lachid Gimel says Rambam, so to Bechin Elu Shemana B'Amr Shein Treifa. So too regarding these things that were listed and were counted as a treifa. Although that we see, or according to the modern medicine that we have, that some of them actually the animal doesn't die, it's possible for it to survive from. You only have what the sages counted. Shlomo says in the pasuk in the Varam, based on the Torah that they taught you, even though we might see one way or the other that others that we think they cannot survive, or these are treifas we think they could survive, we don't question that. We go based on only what the Torah told us, which are these 70 as treifa, not more, not less. Now, look, Ram continues regarding the trustworthiness, regarding if this animal has any of these problems that we mentioned of tarfus or not. So, so any butcher that knows these treifas that we mentioned, and he has a presumed status of being an upstanding person and trustworthy in these laws. So he's allowed to slaughter, and to check it himself, and to sell the meat. There's no concern. And the reason is because the halacha is that one person, the person himself, as an individual witness, is trustworthy regarding prohibitory law, which is here regarding the laws of kashrus, in contrast to other laws like monetary and so on. And this is Bein Yeshloi Hanobe, whether he has pleasure from his testimony, which obviously he is, he's able to sell his stuff, and Bein Loi Hanobe, so whether he has no pleasure from his testimony. Rabbi really explained in the Hilchos Machas Asuris in the 8th parak in Al Chazayin Chaz, She'ein Loichin Basam Mitabach Sheshechet, that we don't purchase meat from a butcher that slaughters, Ubaydik La'atzim, and he checks for himself, B'chutz La'aretz, out of Eretz Yisrael, or Be'eretz Yisrael B'zman Hazeh, or even Eretz Yisrael in today's times, Elam Ken Hayim Mumcha, unless if he was an expert. And if he's an expert, again, then you can buy from him. Now, the miyatz is treif mitachas yod, but let's say you find him selling treifa meat that has this treif problems. So then, then we excommunicate him, we remove him from his post. The kashrus, he cannot go back to his appropriate upstanding position until he goes to a place where they don't recognize him. And that he returns a lost item that something very distinguished. And the reason for that is because we suspect him that he wanted to make money over here because it was a treifa and he really didn't want to take the loss, and therefore he sold it to people. So we don't trust him until we find that financially he wouldn't do an isser for that. Or let's say he would remove something that's a treifa, even for himself. That's a distinguished thing that we see that, the person did tshuva, because you see, money is not the highest priority anymore. It would not take precedence over halacha. Then he could come back to his position that we know he repented, and he would not sell out a Jewish person to sell him a treifa for his financial reasons.